It has been coming up more and more due to the tremendous increase in workforce, especially in corporate world. Now, harassment is one of the serious, unreasonable, and reprehensible conduct which are routinely practiced at many workplaces. And we would all agree to the fact that harassment at workplace has been one of the major contributing factors that impede employees, especially women, from joining the workplace in Pakistan. Now, in this image, you can all see that this person has got a couple of questions in his mind, which we all come across on a daily basis or regular basis, at least some of us. Like, what is sexual harassment? What should I do if I believe I'm sexually harassed? Can I get advice without filing a complaint? Well, we should be discussing all these in today's session in detail. Now, first and foremost, what is workplace harassment? So the word harassment itself, either it's workplace harassment or harassment, legally, there's a legal definition which has been provided under the Pakistani Act, which is Protection Against Harassment Act 2010, which basically has defined this term. It's any unwelcome verbal, physical, visual conduct, request for sexual favors of a sexual nature, causing interference with work performance, or creating any intimidating, hostile, or offensive work environment. So anything which basically cause interference or intimidate you or create any hostile work environment is harassment as per the law. So now, first of all, we need to know and be sure if this is actually harassment or not. Anything that happens to us, we need to have a reasonable person standard that whether this thing is harassment or not. So, for example, if you look at this picture, can you do you think this is harassment? The two people are staring at a girl, or probably they're just looking. So, anyone who would want to answer or speak can unmute themselves.
It's offensive.
Yes, it is offensive because the way they're staring at a certain part of a woman's body, and both of them. So basically, yes, you're right. But the thing is, when you actually want to evaluate that there's harassment, the harasser's conduct should be evaluated from an objective standpoint of a reasonable person. So that is very important. Now, another image, right? This is quite obvious. An example that a coach smacks his secretary on the back in the privacy of his office. So is this unlawful harassment or not? Of course it is. I'm sure everybody would say yes to it. So now, what about the... Yes, sorry. ठीक बिल्कुल
खैरियत से हैं सर ठीक है
जी जी बिल्कुल ठीक Okay, so moving on. Whenever I would want to ask a question, so people can unmute themselves. Otherwise, it would be better and preferred that you press mute so that there is no sound. Now, if we talk about harassment, I'll give you some examples, real life examples of what could be the type of harassment. So there are different kinds of harassments. Now, there's sexual harassment, there is quid pro quo harassment, there is hostile work environment, then there is bullying in the workplace, and there is third-party harassment, age, racial, religious, disability differences. So all these kind of things that happen in any workplace, they will lead to harassment. So they're type of harassment. We'll discuss them in detail later in today's session. Now, what is hostile work environment, which is a very common form of harassment? Now, just because, in a work environment, somebody is being mean to us, being mean, not offensive, but mean, that does not mean that you are being subjected to hostile work environment. So a lot of times when people think of hostile work environment, they automatically equate that to sexual harassment. Now, that's not true. Hostile work environment can encompass many different categories, but just because sexual harassment is such a big component of harassment itself, we will talk more in detail on sexual harassment. Okay, I think I heard someone in between.
Yeah, I think people are switching on their.
Oh,
their
oh,
I
okay.
request everyone to please mute yourself because this is causing disturbance. And let me mute everyone. But I think Hamna, you'll also get muted. So please go ahead and maybe someone
Sure,
talk.
sure, that's fine. That's fine. I would kindly request everyone to please press mute, and when there's a question or anything, then you can press unmute and take participate in the question. So now we were talking about hostile work environment. Now, hostile work environment and sexual harassment are, there's a very fine line between both these, but they're both types of harassment. Hostile work environment is, it usually occurs when there's verbal or any non-verbal behavior in the workplace that actually could be could be focused on sexuality of another person, or gender bias, or is unwanted or unwelcome. So anything that is not acceptable to another person is categorized as hostile work environment. So, and something which is so severe, of course, to that affects the person's work environment. Now, real life examples of hostile work environment, you can see that there's a list of hostile work environment, and this happens in day-to-day things, and these are very common. So for instance, degrading comments, then there's sexual propositions, vulgar language, request for sexual favors, graphic sexual comments, sexual posters, swearing, sexual jokes, bullying, loud or threatening behavior, intimidation, threats, sexual touching, embarrassing questions, or sexual advances. Now, if we move on to this image, there is another image which is basically, like this person who's sitting right there. Anyone would want to answer, can unmute themselves. What do you think? This person is harassed in the work environment? Is he scared? Is what's going on with him?
Hi, this is. I think this comes under the harassment because at workplace, if you are going to harass someone mentally or torture him mentally or keeping him or her in any sort of fear, that comes under the definition of the harassment.
Yes, so correct. Yes, thank you so much for. Sorry.
It's intimidation.
It is intimidation, and जो हो रहा है in front पे तो आपको पता चल रहा है कि कुछ भी नहीं है, but obviously ये इस तरह का एक comic image cartoon बना हुआ है कि जिसमें पीछे like आपके पीछे बहुत सारी चीजें हो रही हैं. So इसमें office politics से भी include हो सकता है. इसके अंदर bullying है. Bullying is a form of harassment, and bullying is a very if we start talking about bullying, तो ये एक नया बिल्कुल एक नया chapter खुल जाएगा. But then this again is harassment. So अब मैं आगे आती हूँ कि there are 4 groups of harassment जो के मतलब कि globally यही होते हैं, ठीक है? So verbal, there is visual, written and physical. Now verbal में these things are all these 4 categories are very self-explanatory, इसलिए मैं बहुत ज़्यादा I won't go into much detail, but verbal would be something that is, for example, derogatory comments, racial or sexual labeling, और sexual favors, sexual innuendos, offensive jokes, या और visual जो होगा आपको कोई picture इस तरह के दिखा रहा है on the computer, or any other cartoon poster, calendar, that is offensive and you don't like it. So that is also a visual form of harassment. Written, of course, is any sort of written note or a personal letter or email sent to you that is not acceptable. So all these kind could be in a sexual nature as well. अगर sexual nature नहीं भी है तो भी वही again as we discussed कि bullying हो सकती है, intimidation हो सकती है, आपको disturbance होती है, interference होती है. Visual में then there is visual form of harassment जो कि offensive pictures, photos, cartoons हमने discuss कर लिया. Physical आपको clearly somebody is touching you without your consent in a very wrong manner, hugging or patting, stroking, or intentionally standing too close. Even in an office environment, somebody is standing too close to you intentionally, that is also wrong. Now, who can commit harassment? So the most important question is कि harassment कौन commit करता है? Usually harassment जो है आपके seniors or somebody who is in power वहीं से ही आती है, because it's easier to target the weaker victim. So weaker आपका line manager हो सकता है, but then again it's not only limited or restricted to only the heads or only the line manager, but could be the person who is committing the harasser, could be your supervisor, your subordinates, आपके co-workers हो सकते हैं, your clients, even your clients and customers, or somebody of the same sex even. Now who will be liable? So liabilities की आ जाती है ना, ये harasser himself, the person who is harassing you is liable. Sorry. Okay, so the person who is harassing you is liable, and the employer is liable. So employer is obviously the organization. I will come to the reason and the what Pakistani law talks about the management's responsibility here. So employer की क्यों responsibility होती है और वो किस तरह liable होता है एक harassment वाली situation में. Although अगर organization पूरा तो नहीं ना harass करता आपको, so only the harasser, the individual के अलावा why employer is liable, that will come to. Now there is another form of harassment. This term which we previously discussed is called quid pro quo. The term itself may sound very complicated, you know, but it means this or that, and this is a very, very common form of harassment. It's basically, it occurs when submission to unwelcome sexual conduct is made a term or condition of an individual's employment. So for example, I'll give you some real life examples here. If for example your supervisor or your boss is telling you that if you accompany him or her for a weekend getaway, he might be able to arrange for some paid time off for you or look into a promotion for you. So this is called quid pro quo, because you are actually forced to do it, and official or unofficial, but you are forced to do this. And in another case, another example I'll give you is that if you might be forced to attend a party after work with your boss, and if you don't, then you are threatened to be discredited or terminated from your job. So this is a form of, this is quid pro quo. It's very, very common. Now so the reason of non-complaint. So why do people don't complain? There has been a lot of surveys and discussions about non-complaints, and people are so scared to actually come out and tell the truth to the management. Complainant surveys mein pata chala ki complainants mostly they say that they share that most of the employees, they avoid sharing their concern to discuss this particular problem, particularly to their heads. Few of them are afraid of consequences. Consequences, for example, fear of losing their job, it might backfire on you. आपके ऊपर इस तरह का pressure later create हो जाएगा कि maybe it will be very difficult for you to work in that same organization. Society pressure बहुत ज़्यादा होता है, especially for females. Females are so not very comfortable in sharing such complaints. And जिसमें आपको लगता है कि आपकी reputation के ऊपर बात आ जाती है, और फिर insults and threats and job insecurity, so you might end up losing your job that way. So these are the reasons of non-complaints. This is why 90% of workplace harassment is never officially reported. So this is basically this is the statistics, the survey उससे पता चला है. अब ये we have discussed the reasons of retaliation examples. I would not go into them, but वही reasons हैं कि you might get a demotion, या फिर आपको forceful termination कर दिया जाए boss या head या organization, because obviously organization की reputation की बात आती है, so nobody would want to compromise or tolerate that. So it's easier for the organization or the head or the CEO of the company to take a decision and say कि उसको retaliate कर देते हैं, इस तरह के वो आपको निकाल सकते हैं उसमें, और या फिर आपके लिए stressful situation create कर सकते हैं. Now, मैं आपके साथ, just to make it a bit more maybe interesting or to understand the issue well, I will share a couple of statements with you from the complainants, जो victims थे, जो harass हुए हैं, according to a survey. कंप्लेनेंट के अपने own words में है कि my friend complained the boss about being harassed and the boss fired me to secure the image of organization. So this unreported act usually motivates the offender to continue this kind of offensive behavior. And Pakistani women generally go through 3 different levels of issues within sexual harassment process. So the first one is that women endeavor to hide sexual harassment due to Islamic modesty and cultural traditions. Secondly, once they decide that to take action, there is a lack of redress at organizational and government level. And finally, once they report the issue, they face victimization. So another reason being, especially for women not complaining, so they don't become a topic for gossip at work. This gossips hoti hain, baatein nikalti hain, and then people actually look down upon you, which is not right. But ye hota hai. These are like normal situations that happen. So as far as my personal experience is concerned, women never raise their issues.
Who's speaking, please? Can you please mute yourself? Hamna, please go ahead.
Can you all kindly mute yourself so that we can?
Hello. Sorry.
Hello. Yeah. So my personal experience, I was talking about my personal experience is that women, women पे बात मैं आगे दोनों की करूँगी. I'll talk about both the genders, but right now I just bear with me कि यहाँ पे women never raise their voices because there's certain reasons. Usually a financial problem, feeling shyness, fear of losing job and sensitivity, feeling of destroying their image and reputation in front of their colleagues. So fear people to mock करेंगे, fear of threatening and many more. And इन्हीं के reasons की वजह से कुछ mental disturbance होती हैं, religious reasons हो सकते हैं, verbal और emotional harassment आपको फिर face करनी पड़ती है लोगों से. So it does take place everywhere, including office environment. Females are in minority and are working shoulder to shoulder in performing their job responsibilities. So females continue to suffer in hostile, lawlessness environment due to lack of organizational policies and human resources. And this is a fact. और ये harassment में अभी, since this topic is only limited to workplace, but harassment is everywhere. It's outside the workplace as well. So now how is harassment very dangerous? देखिए हम लोग कहते हैं कि we ignore it, and हमारी society में what we have learned कि इसको ज़्यादा वो ना करें, आगे vocal ना हो, उसको लेकर ना आए. It might like cause problems, जैसे we discussed earlier कि retaliation हो सकती है. Harassment बहुत dangerous होती है if you do not talk or you don't complain and they don't take it seriously, then इसके अंदर आपकी you suffer work, आपकी productivity, efficiency suffer होती है, loyalty आपकी जो आपकी organization में that is reduced, and then there is a lot of anger, there's a lot of humiliation and loss of work time and loss of job. So nobody would want to work in any organization where you're emotionally or mentally not okay and fit to perform well. So now I come to the most important part of this session, which is the Protection Against Harassment of Women at Workplace Act 2010. So this is a law that has been passed in 2010. This is a Pakistani law that is basically applicable for people who are harassed at workplaces. And this, by the way, I'll just be very clear, this is applicable to both men and women. So it's not only women, it's applicable to both men and women. Now, this act gives us legal protection to an employee against harassment at the workplace, and the purpose of this act is to create a safe working environment where men and women are both able to contribute towards the economy of the country and without fear of harassment or abuse or discrimination. So this law is now I'll come to like very important things here, जो कि अगर हमारे साथ audience में organizations जो senior management भी हैं, employers हैं itself, या फिर जो जिनकी अपनी companies हैं, they should apply this. This law is applicable to all kind of registered organization, government, semi-government, private organization, media or civil society. So all kinds of organizations have to ensure that they basically apply this law in their company. It is, if they don't, then this is a violation of the law. Now, regardless छोटी कंपनी है, sole proprietor है या बड़ी कंपनी है, it is mandatory. ठीक है? And now the second part is कि once you apply it, इसका code of ethics होता है. तो every company, mostly big companies which are FMCGs, they do have a code of ethics policy. So it is the responsibility of every company to apply a code of ethics, code of conduct and code of ethics policy according to the law and implement it so that people can actually use it. Or if you, for example, code of ethics तो बन गया है लेकिन इसको छुपाना नहीं है, उसको you have to display it, you don't have to put it aside, you have to basically make sure that each and every employee of your company knows about the code of ethics. And इसमें मतलब एम्प्लॉयर की रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी होती है ऑर्गेनाइजेशन की, कंपनी की, कि वो हर एम्प्लॉय को हर तरीके से उसको डिस्प्ले करके दिखाएं. सो फॉर एग्जांपल there are for example in Pakistan different languages are used, so not only English, this is as per law I'm talking about, pursuant to the law, not only English but लैंग्वेज जो कि समझ आए एम्प्लॉइज को. फॉर एग्जांपल अगर तो कोई फैक्ट्री ब्रांच है इन लाहौर, तो पंजाबी में, उर्दू में, सिंध में तो सिंधी में, जहाँ के लोकल लोगों को ये चीज समझ आए, टू मेक श्योर दैट दे अंडरस्टैंड दैट व्हाट इज द कोड ऑफ एथिक्स एंड टू so that they can abide by it. Now this is basically what I just discussed, establishing companies' responsibility. Number one is to establish an anti-harassment policy, which is also a code of ethics policy, and it should be very strict and it should be circulated to each and every employee of the company. अगर harasser कुछ इस तरह की हरकत होती है कंपनी में कि कोई हरास कर रहा है, और उसमें मैंने पहले भी ये बात की थी कि सबसे बड़ी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी ही मैनेजमेंट की होती है, क्योंकि मैनेजमेंट लॉ के तहत अगर मैनेजमेंट ने ये रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी ली नहीं है, उसने कोड ऑफ एथिक्स बनाया नहीं है, तो वो ऑलरेडी वायलेट कर रहा है. और वो if management is violating, then the management will be responsible and will be held responsible in the court of law. So the relevant provisions of the act as per section 11 of this act says that employers are responsible for the effective incorporation of the code of conduct as part of their management policy. So secondly, I also mentioned ke jo wo hai iski so section 3 सबसे important. Now we come to the next part where the first responsibility management की थी कि code of ethics को वो implement करे, बनाए और सबको display करे, दिखाए और सबको पता चले. The second responsibility that the management has is as per section 3 of this act. Section 3 के तहत आपने एक inquiry committee बनानी है. In every organization you have to inform an inquiry committee. So now this inquiry committee will consist of 3 members, 3 people, और एक उसमें से member female होना लाजिम है, mandatory है. So there should be one senior management representative in the inquiry committee, one from any other worker management, जो कि mid management हो गया, कोई भी worker होगा, या third अगर तो if there is a union in the company, then one should be a representative of the union. Now thirdly, management's responsibility as per this law is to inform all employees, which I said, about the inquiry committee. So not only the code of ethics, but also you have to inform your employees is organized.
1, 2, 3, yeah, CPHEC, yeah, anything.
No, see, since the tone will be on top and it will cover that action.
Sorry, if somebody is talking here or I'm not understanding, can you kindly press the mute button, please? So now the third responsibility management की है कि वो inquiry committee को छुपा के ना रखें. The inquiry committee should not be discreet and hidden somewhere, nobody knows about the inquiry committee. inquiry committee should be very much visible and should be open to everyone whoever is having issues जिनको complain करनी है वो inquiry committee के पास जाएं उनको पता हो कि ये हमारे members हैं हम इनमें से तीनों में से किसी एक के भी पास जा सकते हैं अपनी complaint raise करने के लिए so that is ये लाजम है ये तीन चीजें जो हैं ये लाजम है organization के ऊपर implement करना. Now the big question is how do you report it? अब आप report किस तरह करते हो अगर for example if somebody is being harassed, right? Firstly, if you face with any kind of situation that you're being harassed in an office environment, could be a man or a woman, it is best advisable to approach and tell the person who's harassing you कि उसको confront very firmly. Don't just be very casual or laugh it off. Confront very firmly and tell that person that you don't like it and this kind of behavior is not acceptable. If that behavior is repeated, then you should definitely report. And if the harassment is severe and so serious, for example, you think it's very dangerous for you, so you are advised to report immediately in the very first time. अब inquiry committee की जो responsibilities हैं, what is the power of the inquiry committee here? Inquiry committee के पास you go for if there is a formal. Now we have talked about the informal action. कि informal action ये होगा कि you will go to the harasser, you can talk to the harasser and ask him to stop this kind of behavior, or informal तरीके से you can also go to any one of the member of the inquiry committee and tell them verbally. Some people are very scared to or shy or think in reputation में होगा तो वो verbally भी जाके complain कर सकते हैं to any one member of the inquiry committee. That is an informal way of complaining. अब then there is another formal way of complaining. Now the procedure for formal, a very serious thing is कि formal आपको बहुत बड़ा एक problem हुआ है यहाँ पे किसी भी employee से और आप harass हुए हो बहुत you want to take it seriously. जी.
Just a request. We have Chinese people also in the webinar, so I think it would easier for them to understand. So I request you to have maximum
I'll speak in. Okay. So yeah.
There is sense for this, Mr. Lahit.
Welcome.
All right. So I'll continue. What is the procedure for formal complaint? So if you want to basically complain formally and you're very serious, you think it's a very dangerous thing happened to you, you have what you do is the inquiry committee has the power to hear the complaints in written form or verbally as well. So some people are more comfortable, as I said, complaining verbally. Now, what you have to do is in a formal way can make sure that the complaint is in a written form, so which should consist of all the details of the incidents. So whatever happened to you, date, person, place, everything should be in that letter. There should be a letter in a letter form, documented in writing, and should consist of all the details. It should be very detailed, including the name, obviously. And then that letter should be signed from any one member of the inquiry committee. So with the date. So when the inquiry committee member signs that letter, the letter of complaint that you bring to the person, that you bring to the inquiry committee member, so anyone can sign it and should write the date of the signing. Now, why I'm emphasizing on the date? Because date is a very important component. The inquiry committee have to decide the matter, this entire matter, within 30 days of the date of complaint received. They have 30 days to actually decide. So now what happens is, once the inquiry committee has received the complaint, committee should within 3 days inform the party against whom complaint has been received and give that party 7 days to submit the response in writing. So the inquiry committee is giving 7 days to the person who has harassed to give reasons of exactly what happened, and they giving that person the right to hear right to give an explanation as well, right to hear. So inquiry committee then after once after the 7 days, within 7 days that the explanation has been submitted by the harasser to the inquiry committee members, the inquiry committee should complete its report within 30 days and give complete decision over to the competent authority. So this is basically a 30-day process, and it's not very long, and it's usually in companies which practice this regularly, they do resolve these kind of matters in within 30 days. So it's a very convenient and a very you know, easy law, I would say, and timely, because strict timelines has to be followed. Now, what the inquiry committee, upon its finding, can award minor or major penalties to the accused. Now, what penalties, you must be thinking, what are the penalties that a harasser could get? So minor penalties would include suspension, recovery of compensation, stoppages ho gaye, withholding for a specific period, recovery, then complainant from the pay or any other source of the income of the accused, or warning, pay deduction that includes as well. So these are minor form of penalties. And then the major penalties would include demotion to a lower post, there's compulsory retirement, you are forced to resign, removal or dismissal from service of office, or fine. So these are all major penalties that will be imposed upon the harasser. Now, if the complainant or the accused, so both the parties, the harasser and the complainant, if they're both not satisfied with the decision of the inquiry committee, they can always appeal to the ombudsman. We have a different forum which is not within the organization, but this is a federal ombudsman where the aggrieved party can actually go and say that I am not happy with this decision and whatever happened is not acceptable, I want to appeal. So the decision will be, so what the ombudsman do is that they basically have another 30 days to see evidences and hear reasons, and then they decide within 30 days, and the decision is then submitted to the organization. So the organization, it is the duty upon the organization to actually comply this decision. And if they don't, for example, the organization is not being very serious about it, and just this a piece of paper, and they think that they just keep it aside and they'll not comply, there will be liable to contempt of court. There is a 25,000 PKR fine that could be imposed upon the organization, and any of the employee of the company could be aggrieved, or any other person, any person who thinks this is not okay and they're not practicing the order, so they can sue the company. So the company will be sued in the court of law. So these are the basically things. Now, role of ombudsman, this is another forum that first we discussed was the inquiry committee and the organization itself, what their responsibilities are. Next is, which we've already discussed, the ombudsman. I'll just highlight some the basic points that people should be aware that what is the role of ombudsman, ombudsperson. So they receive the complaints or appeal, right, and they listen they listen to the evidences and the witnesses, and also you can directly go to the ombudsperson as well. So it's not necessary that first you have to go to the inquiry committee of your organization, although it is always advisable that you should always go to your company in the first place, and later if nothing really happens, then you go to ombudsperson. So these are the powers of ombudsperson. They have they can summon and force the attendance of any person and examining him on oath. They can compel the production of evidence. They receive evidence on affidavits. They can issue commissions. They can enter any premises for the purpose of making any inspection or investigation, and enter any premises. And they have the power, same power as the High Court has, to punish any person for this contempt, and they can impose major and minor penalties as well. As I said, they have the same power as the High Court to punish the person for its contempt. So these were the basically the forums that we have now. As per Pakistani law, what we discussed was that we have an organization, and the organization needs to have an inquiry committee, and the inquiry committee is responsible to, as the forum you go to, or the other forum you can go to is the ombudsperson. Now the third platform forum that you have, as per Pakistani law, is the complainant can directly go to the police. Even if you're harassed at your workplace, you can go to the police. You can complain as per section 509 of Pakistan Penal Code of Pakistan. Now, this is an alternative method that you can obviously practice, and you have the right to practice. This will what will happen is that it will initiate criminal proceedings. Well, this is usually, it's not my personal opinion, but it's usually not advisable for something, for a harassment situation. You go to such forum, because this the criminal proceedings takes a lot of time in Pakistan, and it could last up to some months or years, and also it's very time consuming. It's very costly as well. So it will, you'll have to suffer a lot of cost. Also, it's very difficult to produce evidence and witnesses. Usually in cases like harassments, there are not people who are present who are actually witnessing, or usually these kind of things happen indiscreetly and in a hidden form. So we have now discussed the responsibilities of organizations already. Just give you another overview that in light of the above what I have said, that this act first of all should be and must be appreciated, since it's applicable to both men and women and all kinds of organizations, including educational institutions as well. So educational institutions also have to comply and implement this act and law. And because complaints can be brought against employees, management of an organization, and even members of the inquiry committee of an organization. So I'll be very clear once again that if, for example, you think your inquiry committee member is someone who's harassed you, you can you can go against him as well. So that it's not you basically the inquiry committee member can also be held responsible for the act that he or she has done. So at the end, I can't stress more on the manager's responsibility, which is management's responsibility, which is that must communicate policies, code of ethics, set strict standards, very strict standards, educate your employees. Please educate, conduct trainings regularly. Don't forget about it. If you have code of ethics, if you have inquiry committee, if you have cases coming in, do not conduct meetings, disciplinary action meeting after every year. Do conduct them every monthly. It is suggested and advisable that monthly, and so that there is a precedent that is set in every company that this kind of behavior will not be tolerated and accepted. And you should establish guidelines and make sure all your employees are regularly aware. So you conduct trainings, and for everyone, your staff, so your helping staff, your labor, your union, your employees, your seniors, your heads, your CEO, everyone, and observe workplace and behavior regularly and conduct. You need to remember one thing, which mostly are females, they believe that it's their fault. No, sexual harassment is not your fault. Sexual harassment is not only about sex, and it is about power. So the more power a person has, he will probably misuse it. So the best tools to eliminate sexual harassment are, once again I will say, is education, training, prevention and action. Women and men should be provided with training to deal with such a situation, and provided with safe working environment, and strict internal policies should be implemented by each organization to function effectively. So here the golden rule that you all can see is that treat others the way you want to be treated. Together we must work to create and maintain a work environment that is free of workplace harassment. So thank you everyone. This is it for today. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. And you can now press the button.
Wonderfully good. Thank you so much, Hamna, for the very informative and a very useful presentation. So
thank you, sir.
That feel free to ask your question, and I'll appreciate everyone. First, raise your hand. I think the first one is Noman to ask some questions, because so that I can direct the conversation. And secondly, keep your questions short. Third thing, now I am switching on my video, and you also have to